Are you a little weird? Or maybe more than a little? When someone peeks over your shoulder while you are drawing, what is your reaction? Do you have to resist the urge to slam the thing closed simply to avoid having to discuss whatever it is that you were drawing? Or maybe you don't resist and you do close the book, dodging questions. I had a student a while back. This was a 6th grade girl, and she was one of those kids that just did everything right. She was sweet, kind, got good grades, and had a goofy sense of humor. She was in my drawing class, and I noticed after a time that she tended to keep her sketchbook closed when I walked by, when anyone tried to take a peek. After a while, I asked about it, and with a glance this way and that, she started giggling. Slowly, she opened the sketchbook, and in stark opposition to the drawings of her best friend next to her, she had these children's horror stories unfolding on the pages. Monsters and fangs and eldritch things crept forth, and she just found them hilarious. Her friend was a little weirded out, wondering why she couldn't just draw unicorns and horses like the rest of them. But this kid was committed. She knew what she liked to draw, and she enjoyed these things with a slight macabre angle to them. And you know what? She turned out just fine. Healthy adult, good kid, good sibling, good person. Sometimes you just have to embrace the weird. My name is Zach, and welcome to episode 69 of the podcast. As you may have gleaned, today we will be talking about the innate weirdness of art, and why delving into it can be good, healing, and perhaps simply enjoyable for the funny looks it puts on other people's faces. As usual, I'm going to explore what I mean by the topic, and then go over how this might actually affect you as an artist, though I'm going to start adding some closing thoughts and updates at the end of each episode now, so stay tuned for those as well. Feel free to check out the Discord and Patreon link below. Before we dive in, I want to talk about an interesting recent community post on the channel, though. I asked my community what medium they wanted to invest more time into this year, and surprisingly, to me, the majority were focused on pens and ink. Now, this might seem strange that I find this strange, since I focus a lot of my time here on the channel on those things, but I wonder, are most of you ink artists, or is there something elusive about ink in general that pulls you toward it? I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I'm just curious. All right, let's dive in. Well, first of all, what do I mean by weird? Weird is a weird word. It defines nothing really, just that whatever thing you are referring to is outside of a given norm. In fact, the word strange or weird have no definition if you don't know what the opposite of them is. They're one of those strange conglomerations. When I talk about embracing the weird, though, I am really breaking it down into two main categories. Work on the art that you want to, regardless of what others around you might think, or what the marketability of a thing is. And second, explore things that are strange to you, that perplex you, that maybe even seem weird to you. When this comes to the art itself, it can have many forms. For me, part of this was simply painting the things that I wanted to. Birds mostly, as of late. Now, obviously, birds aren't that strange. They're not a very weird thing to put time into working on, but I come from an academic field. I was an art educator in a classical school for 11 years, and before that, I was in art school, and I went to a fine arts school. So when I had a single student in one of my upper division painting classes that turned all of the random pipes in the utility building into a robot with a flamethrower, my professor was not happy. He passed him on it, he gave him a low C, but he was really hesitant to even do that. Coming from that more academic background, there was an expectation of certain things done, that you, as any good painter should, will focus on landscapes and portraiture and still life. The idea of focusing on something from imagination was totally anathema to that world. In fact, in the 5 years that I spent at university, I never once had a single teacher talk for a moment about drawing from imagination. There was so little creativity involved in everything except for my graphic design courses that it's kind of staggering to look back on. When I was in the midst of it, of course, it was just, I guess this is what this is. And it's really easy for us as artists and creatives to fall into that trap, to think, well, my parents want me to do this, or the people around me, the other artists or teachers want me to do this. That must be what's right. That must be what's normal. And, you know, that right there is why we're talking about it today. The fact that you can so easily fall into the trap of thinking this is normal, this is how it should be done, and sometimes you have to do the weird. For some students that I taught over the years, the weird is the fact that your parents are artists, but you want to be a different kind of artist. Maybe everyone in your life works in the jewelry business, or they're painters or framers, and you're like, I want to sculpt. I want to be a potter. That's totally fine, but it's weird in that environment. So as I'm talking about this today, that's kind of the place I'm coming from. The weird can be very different for each of us. If you spent your whole life drawing anime and manga characters, the weird for you might be stepping into realism, stepping into things that were maybe fearful for you in your youth, but might have a nice benefit for you moving forward. So whatever the weird is for you, the step outside of your norm, the thing that maybe you're a little bit embarrassed about but really is exciting for you, that's what it is for you today. So why is this good? Why, obviously, like I've spent a couple minutes talking about what weird is, but why is this a beneficial thing for you as a creative or an artist? Why is this something that I want to spend some time talking about? And probably why is this something that's been important for me? At a very basic level, it can simply be freeing to try the things that you want to, but you've felt some pressure keeping you from doing so. Again, like I mentioned in my own life, working in an academic circle, if a colleague had come in and I was drawing a dragon or a robot, if that colleague wasn't somebody who had a relationship with me already, one of my friends, there would be a shift in their perspective and how they were perceiving me. If they had worked with me for any amount of time, they would understand that I took what I did very, very seriously. But in an academic circle, when you come in and somebody is drawing a robot rather than working from a still life or studying from the masters, there's this, oh, this person's a little childish. Maybe they don't take art very seriously. I probably don't want my daughter to be in their class. And obviously, this is not true. There's nothing about that particular moment that would indicate anything about that particular artist or teacher. In fact, I did spend most of my time working on more academic things, but it is freeing to dive into the new things, to dive into the things that you really enjoy. And there's pretty much always pressure in this way. It's sometimes pressure from yourself, where you are thinking, I want to get better at this particular realm of art. I want to get to the point where I can draw figures and I want to understand anatomy. And so that's where you focus your time. So maybe all of your practice time is spent drawing from websites that allow you to see figures. Maybe they're even timed. You're really regimented about how you're doing things. Maybe most of your free time for drawing is drawing perspective boxes, is drawing objects that are hanging out around your room, still life, portraiture. These are the things that you feel you should be drawing. Maybe it's the pressure of high class kind of things where you go, this is what real artists work on. Not just what you should be working on, but if I want to be taken seriously, I have to paint landscapes. If you go into most art galleries, the paintings and drawings that reside there are generally of that kind of thing, are they not? They have a certain category to them. When you look at a lot of the art around here, a lot of the art in the mountains of Colorado, when we go to the galleries, I'd say the most prominent version of painting is like a pseudo-impressionistic or post-impressionistic styling. Lots of bright colors, often depicting the aspens, the trees, the sunsets, the mountains, those kinds of things. They're beautiful. I love them. I've worked in that style a little bit in my life, but it is not my favorite way to work. Now, in my own pursuits, I spent years working and honing that style because I kind of unconsciously felt like that was the right way to go. When I started to work more frequently and play with birds and animals, I found them way more enjoyable and way more fun. Stylistically, too, I started working in more of an impressionistic manner where I let my brush strokes just kind of linger. I spent a long time trying to blend out every brush stroke so that it looked like, hey, this I can't even tell what the artist did here. And the older I got, the more I realized, no, seeing a piece of the artist in the piece is really entertaining. and allows for a lot of dissections of interesting things, and there's a lot of joy there to be had in seeing the hand of the artist behind the piece. But again, this is going to look different for you. It's going to look different for most artists. It's not about we need to pursue this thing. It's that if you feel like the things that you pursue artistically, that you practice artistically, are the things that you do so because you feel this pressure from within or without to do so, then it can be very freeing to jump into the weird things, to jump into things that are outside of your norm. It can also be freeing to try something new, to risk the potential of discovering a new love. So maybe it's not necessarily the fact that you've got something you want to do and you're dodging it, but maybe it's just by allowing yourself to experiment, to do things that are outside of what you would normally do, you can find something that's going to bring you a new level of joy. I've talked about this many times on the channel, but I'll mention it here as well. For me, there's been a couple mediums in the past couple years that I've stumbled upon that have been really exciting. Gouache was the first one, because the idea of being able to work light colors on top of darks is so lovely when it comes to paint. The brush pens were another one, just something that I enjoyed and I didn't know existed, so stumbling onto that was really fun as well. Sometimes this is subject matter though. I haven't had much of this because I have a tendency to draw lots and lots of things, but there have certainly been cases in my life as a teacher where a student would get to a particular topic or a particular medium and just go, oh my goodness, like I didn't know this existed. This could also take the form of style. Maybe there's other styles that you've never experimented in. Maybe they're not ones that you've wanted to experiment with, like I mentioned in the prior point, but maybe there's something that has been kind of anathema to you. Maybe all of your art is hyper realistic and you've never tried stylizing things. Well, maybe taking some time and working on cartoons, anime, manga, even Western cartoons with their very exaggerated forms might be exciting for you. It's definitely going to be new and different. And even if you don't stick to it, you'll often learn something about yourself in that exploration, in that process. So it can be really freeing to try something new. I often talk about this when it comes to foods, that if you haven't given a particular kind of cuisine a chance, you just don't know if it's going to be your favorite cuisine. Most of the time, it's not going to be. You're going to be nostalgic for the things that you've always loved. But every once in a while, it's going to remind you of the dishes that your mother made. It's going to remind you of the things that you grew up drawing or wanting to draw and loved, and that's going to give it this push, and it's going to be something that finds a new home in your life. Trying out the weird things can sometimes jumpstart your motivation. Motivation is this fickle and strange thing. I would encourage you as a creative to find any ways that you can to not rely upon it. I know that sounds very strange. A lot of people will ask questions about, like, how do you work when you're not motivated and this. And it's like, motivation plays very little role in my work. I work because I've set up time to work and I'm going to work. And if I rely on my motivation, I'm generally, just not in a good place. But you can jumpstart motivation often by trying something new. If you draw or paint a singular subject matter, trying something new or trying a new medium can often just serve as a spark to kick that fire into motion. This is a very exciting thing, and it's something that is probably in need of being a permanent fixture in each of your rotations artistically. Whatever it is that you work on, you almost can set up time every 2 weeks or 4 weeks to take a day or an evening or whatever. It's going to depend on how much time you have to work on your art. But if you work a little bit every single day, and every 14th day, you take a little bit of time to draw something totally random. Maybe you grab a random word generator and have it, give you some things. Maybe you ask ChatGPT, like, these are the things I normally draw. Can you give me something that's really, really different? And it kicks something out to you and you go, oh, I draw all still lifes and this thing told me to draw a Gundam. Now I'm going to have to figure out what that looks like. Doing that can sometimes just put you in a place where it connects dots that you didn't know were there. It can point you in new directions. Yes, you can find new loves with it, but often whatever it is that you tend to work on, whatever it is that you really enjoy working on, your art sense is going to come back to that. So I like working here on the channel, obviously on these big ink pieces. A lot of them are telling the story of Andorra as she explores this kind of crazy wizarding world. And I also like to draw dragons, and I like to draw robots. Now, when I draw construction material, obviously that is going to come back pretty quickly and easily to the robots. When I go sit out in nature and I draw trees and things like that, those textures allow me to, better use ink techniques or just have a better understanding of what I'm trying to replicate with those ink techniques when I do my ink drawings. If I go draw any kind of animal, that's going to come into my dragons. So maybe I don't want to draw an orange, but if I sit there at the kitchen counter for 15, 20 minutes and draw that orange, I'm working on representing texture in whatever medium I'm working on. And those textures that I learned how to work with are going to come back into other things. Now, that's not really jumpstarting the motivation, but it's just an orange. If I'm working from drawing a hyena, though, and I'm looking at that jaw and I'm figuring out how the teeth go together, there is a very big chance that I am going to get excited about a new kind of dragon or some kind of strange, demonic robot that can have teeth. And when you work on other things that are just not what you always work on, you always run the chance of stumbling into something that just is a spark. It ignites your motivation. And if you're in a wise position where you can jump then back into your main kind of artwork and continue on, that little flame is a harnessable, wonderful, beautiful thing. In that same train of thought, though, it can inspire future works. So maybe it's not putting you back into what your normal is, but maybe it can be the first stone that starts the avalanche of a new set of explorations. You start drawing something, but you copying some artist that you really enjoy on Instagram. And as you work on their stuff, ideas pop into your mind about future pieces, things that are not necessarily linked to what you normally do. This can be this not just motivation, but inspiration. This is another one of those words that, again, if you can find a way to unhinge yourself from needing to rely on inspiration, your life will be better as a creative. That said, it's hard for most of us to detach from it, and it's still going to exist even if you haven't detached. You are going to have moments where it pops up, and if you're ready to utilize it, you can. And you almost create like save points as you start to explore new things and embrace new topics and weird things for your art. You'll create these little pockets of motivation and inspiration, things that either in the moment can be used as a jump starter, but often down the road can give you things to come back to. Maybe you save references. Maybe you like some pictures and save them. I often, on Instagram, a little bit of a side, but on Instagram, I like to create little, they're not playlists, but I can save images that I like into a folder of a kind. And it means that whether I'm working on a particular kind of painting or drawing or concept art or even miniature painting stuff, I can go back to that later and these are all the ones that I really liked when I was doing this part of the process. I love saving things like that. I've got lots of folders on my computer for references. The only problem here is you can get in this loop of tricking yourself into thinking you're working because you're saving things and you're finding things. But if you do that for half an hour and that's your art time for the day, you've accomplished no art. So I would recommend, if that's you, try to set aside some time specifically for that. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm finding and saving references. Mark Burnett talks about this a lot, and some other artists do too, I'm sure, but it's one thing that I go back in my mind to, he talks about specifically observing art every day and reference gathering. It's valuable, but it does not take the place of actually putting a pencil or a brush or a pen onto that page. All right, let's get back to the other things. So you can flex your risk-taking muscles too by exploring strange, weird things that are outside of your norm. This is kind of a dual benefit. This is good for art because it puts you in a position artistically where you are going to experiment with new media, try new things out, try something, subject matter-wise that's different than what you would normally. But the other side of this is that it applies to many other areas in your life as well. If you're able to, on your own, presuming that you are likely an introvert, though not all of you are, but many artists are, probably the largest percentage. And if you are given the opportunity to yourself to explore new things, try new things out, or take risks in a kind of small, boxed in, safe area, You are working out those muscles for doing things that are much more stressful. It's hard to make certain kinds of phone calls. It's hard to show up for a job interview. It's hard to meet new people. It's hard to move to a new place. And yet, all of these are risk taking opportunities, situations where you have the potential for something brand new and great to present itself, but you have to risk failure. You have to risk disappointment, embarrassment, and all these things. It's really hard for us to do. It seems to me, though I know it's hard for most people, that it's harder for artists to be in these kinds of situations than a lot of other folk. But if you can try to do new things in your art in an arena that is by and large just for you, it's singular. And if you fail at a drawing, you fail at a painting, you fail at your first time trying to draw a giraffe, it doesn't really matter. There's not really big consequences, but it helps you get better at taking those risks, better at walking into new situations and working out those skills so that when you have to go take a new job somewhere, when you have to talk to your counselor and tell them that you want to change your area of study, you want to change your major, you want to talk to your spouse about, moving to a different country or a different state. Like those are, risk-taking situations. And you can grind up those skills by doing it in an artistic sense. I didn't really intend for this to go here because I actually have like a mental health standpoint segment later, and this probably fits more in that, but that's part of what happens with the script structure that I have for these. But yeah, there are a lot of benefits to kind of just building up your risk-taking muscles by trying new things out artistically. Lastly, in this category for why it's good to embrace the weird and try new things is it encourages playfulness. For most of us, when we got into art in the first place, it was just play. I have a 5.5-year-old daughter, and when she started drawing, was probably 2.5, and she was just playing. She wasn't making anything that was discernible at that moment. She was drawing shapes and scribbles and color onto paper and cardboard and things like that, which is a great thing for development in little children. Nowadays, she draws things. She draws scenes, she draws monsters. I probably shouldn't be surprised, but she's got monsters with lots of eyes and tentacles and arms, and that almost sounds like some stuff I do. So it's funny. I'm waiting for the inevitable email or parent-teacher conference with her teacher where it's like, she draws some weird things. It's like, hey, Cthulhu needs love too. Let the toddlers come to him. That sounds really weird. I didn't intend for that, but that's, I'm leaving that in because that sounds very strange. I did not mean to make a nearly biblical parallel there. Ugh, very weird. Okay, moving on. There's a lot of playfulness in her art, in the art of kids. And for almost all of us, when we got involved in art in the first place, we were playing. We lose some of that as we get older, often. Not all of us. And if you are one of those souls who has held on to the playfulness, oh my goodness, you are wonderful. Please, please never lose it. Don't let people talk you out of it. But art should always have a playfulness aspect. It is exploration. It is adventure. It is taking things from your mind, from your imagination, and bringing them into reality. If you do that without play, it's very mechanical. It's part of the reason why AI and computers making art is always going to be fraught with so many issues. There's no soul to it. When you as a human are playing and trying new things out, trying new ideas, trying new mediums, doing stuff that you kind of expect to fail, and then if it does, you're just like, it's fine. And if it doesn't, you're like, oh, this is cool. I like this. That's a playful thing. You're almost returning to this safer era of being human when you were younger and you were more naive to the world around you. That playfulness is really good. It's really beneficial. If you go back on this channel, actually, if you look at the art that I put in my first, maybe 24 videos, it was not very playful. It was coming from an academic standpoint. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I didn't enjoy it as much. When I started working on my robots, on my Inktober pieces, on these large format pen drawings, honestly, I was self-conscious of having them on the channel at first. I had built the channel up in my mind, probably more than reality, to be this I'm an academic person, I am a teacher, and I'm talking about artistic and creative problem solving. Nothing wrong with that. I don't regret that time, but it was less enjoyable. When I started working on drawings and paintings that were goofy and had some humor to them and were more enjoyable for me, I think the content improved as well. This started probably with my first set of sketchbook sessions, where I was drawing dragons and robots and monsters. And they did fairly well on the channel, especially in comparison to some of the other stuff. And I didn't catch on to it then, but I'm kind of thinking about it now as I'm recording this, is I was enjoying that art more, and maybe because of that, or in part because of that, other people enjoyed watching it. They enjoyed my rambles about it. That makes a lot of sense, I think. And when my art became more playful, it didn't become, less academic or less accurate or less sellable or whatever you're worried about. It just became more fun. My paintings nowadays are more playfully done, but they're actually selling better than they used to. My drawings are more playful now, but I'm actually getting better at showing textures and perspective and three-dimensionality, largely because the playfulness allows me to work longer. It allows me to stay with a thing for a long period of time, because guess what? It's fun. So embrace the weird things. Try the new things, the strange things, the things that you felt pressure to avoid in the past, because it encourages that playfulness. It makes the art more fun, and for a lot of reasons, not just your joy, which should not be undermined. That's a really important thing. But it can actually just help you stick with the art longer, and that's a beautiful thing in and of itself. So let's take a look at this from a mental health or psychological standpoint. I often separate these things out because I think they're both really important, but at least for me, in the way that I process and think about things, I like to have them segmented. First thing here is that embracing the weird and the strange, the kind of desires that you have artistically, can help you build a judgment-free working condition. And what I really mean by this is judgment-free from yourself. You're not judging yourself as much. It's easy, again, echoing those points from earlier, to work on things that you think you're supposed to, the things that you should do, the things that those around you want you to do. And if you start specifically focusing on spending time on the things that you want to, the things that are even just different or strange, then you start to build this arena where you can work on your art and you're not being quite as hard on yourself for this process. Artists in general, and I'm sure if this isn't you, then it's another artist that you know. Artists are hard on themselves. We have very high expectations for what we want to achieve. We often have inflated expectations about how long it's going to take to achieve those things. We're kind of hard on ourselves. There's a reason that probably the mantra of this channel is be gracious with yourself, because most of us as artists are not. We don't do a good job of this. This is something that is just hard. We have imaginations that often run wild. We have the ability to remember and memorize so many things artistically that are important for what we want to do, for all the stories we love, all the artists we love. And then we're frustrated when we sit down to work on something and we can't apply all of that knowledge. Because knowledge and skill is not the same thing. They are not synonymous. You can know how a technique works. You can even know all the pieces and steps of a technique, but that doesn't translate to actually doing it. And so experimenting with new things, allowing yourself to embrace stuff that is a little bit weird, can create this environment and hone the skill set of not judging yourself, of being kinder and more gracious to your own artistic pursuits. Sometimes this extends specifically to the pieces themselves. You're just kinder to the artwork that you produced. After all, you brought it into this world. It exists because of you. It makes sense to honor it in some way. But more often than that, it just extends to yourself. You feel less like a failure because you've constructed opportunities specifically to mess around with things. And it's really good. It's really beneficial for us as artists. You can also use this methodology to start working through perfectionism. You can create a little pen, a safety pen, around your work, where this is an arena specifically designed for failures. Now, I know that some of you don't like the word failure, but I think it is strong enough in its connotation that it's beneficial for the people who need to hear it. If an artwork doesn't turn out the way you want, you might consider that a failure. If you don't, that's wonderful. You've worked hard probably to get yourself into a position where you can think about it in more constructive terms, and that's wonderful. But most of us have to get there. We don't just start off there. And whether you still call those works that don't live up to your expectations failures or opportunities or learning, whatever it is you call them, embracing the weird can create this safe little space for them to exist, where they don't affect your psychological state, where they're not something that if somebody points it out and critiques it, it doesn't matter in the same way, because it wasn't built with the same purpose. It wasn't built with that same idea in mind. It's a different thing. And that can be really constructive, really beneficial, because the reality is when you let those things sit inside of that little area and grow and prosper, eventually some of them will get to a point where they can be transplanted into the garden of your normal artistic work. The metaphors just happen. I don't intend for them always. But you can pull those things out and they become a part of your normal rotation. And that only gets to happen because you are creating a space for those things to exist. Psychologically, this is really beneficial. For people like me, it's really nice because if a thing is categorized, I can let it be that thing. If an experiment, if trying out, I really want to get a new sketchbook or find one that I can kind of adopt out of my older work, and like this is just for experimenting. I don't have that one right now, and I really feel the need. I've got some new artistic ventures I want to try out. I've got some new art supplies I got for Christmas, and I want to have a space to just do them where it, whatever happens, happens. So I will probably procure that sketchbook here pretty soon, and that'll be a good thing for me. But yeah, it can help work against perfectionism if you create a specific space for yourself to work with them. And often this is achieved by embracing things that are outside of your norm because the expectations are not already laid upon them. And that's why you should get into the weird stuff. Basically, this whole thing, though, is about reframing how you look at your artwork, how you look at yourself as an artist. When you think about weird art or making weird things, there is often a connotation to that word. Weird was thrown around in many of our youths to reference the strange, the obtuse, and sometimes the bad. I don't know about you specifically, but for me and for a lot of my friends, our parents called the things that they looked down on weird. Why are you doing that? That's weird. Why do you like this music? It's so weird. Why do you like this video game? It's so weird. We knew what was really being communicated there, which is, I don't understand this and I think it's stupid and you shouldn't like it. I'm disappointed in the fact that you like it. And weird sometimes has that connotation because if you're like me, it was a word that was used almost always in the negative, in my youth at least. So some of us, myself included, have taken the term on as a badge of honor, holding to it. Look at me and my weird. The same kid that ran around on stage in a punk rock band is still within me. And yet that attitude is also just a reaction to the negative attitude of the word weird. Now, I did spend a lot of my youth, all the way up into like my mid-20s, specifically reacting to that, embracing things that were weird and strange because they were. And a lot of that was that reaction to being the kid that was different, the kid that stood out, the kid that got yelled at the most, who got told to sit the right way in class, stop fidgeting, stop tapping, stop drawing while I'm instructing. All those kind of things. I reacted to that by embracing the weird. But even from that perspective, I was reacting to something that had a connotation that was negative. So it's good to kind of go back to that definition in your brain to figure out that the word doesn't need to have that connotation. And sometimes the things that you think of as artistically weird are things that you think of that way specifically because other people in your life put those labels on them. Maybe they need to stay, maybe they don't, but I would encourage you to take a look, to think about those things. Because if they are connotations that other people have given them and you don't want to hold on to those anymore, you don't have to. So what does this look like in actual application? How can you actually get into embracing the weird and trying new things? Well, I feel like on a lot of levels, this doesn't need to be expanded on a ton. I will go on in a minute and I will give some actual practical things. I'll even talk about some things that I have done. But really, this whole time I've been talking about trying to draw or paint or sculpt or whatever your medium is, work on a new subject matter. That's the number one thing you can do. Embrace something that is very outside your norm when it comes to whatever it is that you generally build. The other, obviously, I already mentioned like 10 seconds ago, is try a different medium. If you're a painter, try drawing more. If you're a drawer, try sculpting. Try working with other things. I've mentioned in a couple videos recently and a lot on the Discord server that I've taken up painting miniatures. Right now, they're primarily Warhammer, both Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40k. I don't play the games, but the miniatures are really cool, and it's a very different thing for me. When I draw or paint, I am in charge of putting every single line down. And when I paint a miniature, all of the features exist. I just have to worry about color and about implying three-dimensionality, and it's way less stressful. Now, it's not really the same kind of art that I do here in any capacity, but it is a different hobby, and it does different things in my brain. I don't know that it's influenced my painting and drawing yet, but it probably will at some point. And more than that, it's been enjoyable. It's been a nice way to end out my evenings. It doesn't require quite as much brain power, so I can sit there and listen to audiobooks or podcasts, or even just talk to my wife or my daughter while I'm working on it. But that's been one for me recently. It's a new medium, a new form of art, and it's been really nice for me. That allows me to take time that I would have been spending on video games, which nothing wrong with video games, but I'm producing things rather than just consuming. And I think it's good for us, especially as creatives, to always be more on the creating side rather than consuming. But here are some ideas about how you can kind of re-engage in the weird and embrace this. First of all, if you've been at this for a while, embrace some of your old work. Go back and find an old sketchbook or old paintings that you didn't finish. Take a look at the things that inspired you then, the things that were exciting to you, and try to redevelop those ideas. I will probably do that this year because I think it would be kind of fun to do, to go back into a 6th or 7th grade sketchbook and start pulling out designs in there and going, what was I trying to accomplish and how much better can I accomplish it now? In some train of thought, you're allowing yourself an excuse to explore nostalgic things, which can be really fun. You don't have quite as much stress coming up with ideas because the benchmark already kind of exists and the template already exists as well. So you kind of just get to explore things. But that could be a really fun way for you to dive into something that is already, meaningful to you, but is something that you haven't touched in a long time. And probably something that when you did initially work with it, it was very playful and didn't have a lot of expectations attached to it. It can be a really interesting thing. If you do that, I would love to hear about it in the comments. I'd love even more for you to share stuff on the Discord server. It would be lovely to see. In addition to that, try to find the goofy things that you enjoy in life. Try to find these things on places like Instagram or Pinterest or YouTube, places where you might save things. Maybe you collect dolls or children's toys or stuffed animals like me, because you can never have too many stuffed animals. I now have a kid, so I have an excuse to have even more of them. But find those goofy things, the things that make you smile or laugh that are just a little bit different. Maybe it's a TV show, if you're like me and you watch The Lord of the Rings repetitively. Walk away from those things then. Hold them in your brain. Think about them. The goofy, the funny, the whatever. And walk away from the social media. Walk away from the screens. And start making your own version of that. If you love Lord of the Rings like me, walk away from those things and start building your own interesting world. You will not get it right initially. It will take some time to sift through ideas and sort through things. But allow the things that you find exciting, that you haven't yet attached to your art, and explore those things. If you like the little sculptures that you see, people working with tile maybe on Instagram, somebody working with wood on Instagram, carving, or using one of those, I've been seeing ads for a little wood carver thing on Instagram. It's like, if that really excites you, like you like working on that stuff, try it. Like, allow yourself for a moment to embrace the beauty of the internet. I'm generally a person who kind of hates on it because I'm an old man at heart. But the reality is it allows you to be exposed to so many interesting, cool things. So embrace that for a moment. Join in on the things that are exciting, that are different, that are weird, that are outside of your norm, that you've only been observing and smiling about for the last 6 months. Try them out. Maybe you love the stuffed animals, but have you ever really thought about making your own? I hadn't remember this in forever, but I actually did make like some weird voodoo doll style dolls when I was in high school. It's amazing what you can do with just stuff lying around the house and with a little bit of ingenuity. So allow yourself to be inspired by the things that you're already allowing to infiltrate your life. Be excited about them and then walk away from the social media unless you're using it as a tool to learn more. And I mean this specifically. You are Googling how to felt, how to, whatever. There's so many options. I don't want to go on with 1,000 examples, but allow yourself to be inspired by those things that you stumble upon in your downtime each day and create your own versions of those. If you love the Dark Souls games, you've been playing Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree, and the weapon design and the armor design is exciting for you, start working on those things. Whatever it is that has been tantalizing and exciting for you, kind of just hanging out in the ether and you haven't yet touched, try it. You don't know how it's going to motivate or inspire you. You don't know what role it's going to have in your artwork going forward, and you don't need to. In the meantime, it will probably just spark joy, and it will put you in a position where you have something to springboard off of. You have the ability to ignite things, and that's really what you're looking for. Well, what are my closing thoughts on this? Let's chew on this for just a moment. I suppose every time I make a podcast or I ramble on a sketchbook session or something, I'm doing one of two things. I'm either making the content for a younger version of me and desperately hoping that it's going to meet somebody out there in the ether who needs to hear it. Or I'm making it for a student that I had in the past or currently have who needs to hear that information, who I'm hoping to, talk to specifically in that content. I wish that I would have gone back and immersed myself in the things I really enjoyed artistically years ago. I am 37 now, and I struggle a little bit with the regret of, man, if I had started embracing these things, started doing even just my robot drawings when I was 25 and had continued to do them, I'd have thousands of them done now. And more than that, my skills would have so improved. But I feel like in a lot of ways, although I've been involved in the artistic world really since I was about 16 or 17, I am taking art seriously for the first time in my life. I am in the little local gallery, so I'm painting at a more serious level. I'm drawing at a more serious level. I'm doing the video I'm doing all of it at a far more serious level than I ever have. And it's funny because from an outside perspective, teaching art probably seemed so serious and so dedicated to so many people, and yet my time was dedicated towards helping others and very seldom towards helping myself. So in this exploration, I suppose I am talking to my younger self, but at the same time, talking to a lot of artists on my Discord server, some of whom are, my age or a little bit older. It's important to think about the fact that you're never too old to do this. You're never too old. If your hands still work, your eyes still work, you can get into your art. If you haven't touched it for 20 or 30 or 40 years, it doesn't matter. I want you, if you're listening, to feel like you have the freedom to do the things that you want to do, to draw, to paint, to learn how to do a new thing artistically, to embrace the weird things you've always wanted to, but you've had some condemnation in your life that has not allowed you to do that. It's important. It doesn't need to be weird, in a stereotypical setting, but So often, weird is just something that is just outside of our norm, something that we don't allow ourselves to do. And I guess that's the whole point, right? Is expand your horizons, try new things. Maybe you'll stumble upon something you love. Maybe you'll rediscover an old passion, but you don't know. And it's so easy to get locked into just doing what you normally do. So yeah, that's it. I hope this was good for you. I hope you enjoyed listening. I appreciate you being here. Thank you to my patrons who are on the screen right now. If you want to check out my Patreon, it's linked below. It gives you access to some videos exclusively there, generally about what's going on in my life, about the stuff I'm exploring. You have the ability to vote on polls and suggest topics for podcasts just like this one. Please check out the Discord server as well. It's totally free. It's just a small artistic community where you can share your artwork, get feedback on things, all that good kind of stuff. Well, have a good one, y'all. See you soon.